Hi, welcome back for another episode of Let's Talk About It. My name is Amy, and today I'm joined by Kostas. Kostas is the lead behind the EDR Telemetry Project, which is a very cool community-driven initiative. And the goal of this initiative is to provide and share information about telemetry capabilities across different EDR vendors and across operating systems. But we'll hear a lot more about that from Kostas in the episode. So without further ado, let's get into it. Welcome to the show, Kostas. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much, Amy, for inviting me.
So, I have a couple questions for you about your EDR telemetry project. And honestly, number one is, could you tell us a little bit more about what it is and why you started it?
Sure, yeah. Well, first of all, let me tell you what it is first. It's just a way to demonstrate the different EDR telemetry capabilities for the various EDR products out there. And basically, we just highlight what can the user find searching through their EDR product and how can they use this data for threat hunting or detection or investigations. Basically, it started because we wanted a way to be able to see what data we have to our disposal as users of the products. And we didn't have to go read through the documentation, or sometimes the documentation was not available for different EDR vendors. And that looked like a black box type of telemetry. From the telemetry documentation perspective, we want to open source it, make it available so people can compare the telemetry that they can get from different vendors. And by telemetry, I mean the data that they can get from different vendors.
Yeah,
Um,
I was
and
gonna
yeah,
ask
this is
about
how it
that
started. Yeah.
because telemetry to me, when I think of telemetry, I just think of data. But
Mm.
is there anything more to say on what telemetry actually is in this context?
Yeah, basically, it's the data that are created by those EDR products and are made available to the end user. We have separated the data to different categories and subcategories, just so the user understands, and it's easy for them to be able to compare between vendors. But also, this is the telemetry that we think it's the most useful during an investigation. So we have telemetry, for example, data related to process activity, file manipulation, authentication, and those sort of categories. And then we have subcategories that go a little bit deeper into these telemetry types. And yeah, this is the data that basically we need then as investigators to be able to respond to an incident.
Yeah. So now I have to imagine that part of the reason why you started it was a need that you had yourself, of lack of data and lack of understanding and experiencing this black box.
It was basically mostly the lack of visibility, and it felt like it was like a black box. Um, And I understand personally why detections, for example, are a black box. We don't want to show our detections to the world because, threat actors are watching. We don't want to make our methods of detecting something publicly available. But telemetry is a little bit different. For telemetry, we want to make sure that we know what we have. So we are ready to investigate different intrusion scenarios or detection alerts that come through.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a little bit different. So the
Yeah.
lack of visibility was the main motivation.
Yeah. And so when you were starting this and with the data that you're evaluating or seeing what kind of data that these companies are collecting, was there a specific avenue or part of that data that you were lacking that visibility in that motivated you to start this project?
Not specifically. I just want to see across all the different vendors, how are they generating the telemetry and what are the differences between those? Because EDRs now are used by so many organizations and have become, the number one data source for when it comes to investigations. And that's probably for the organizations that can afford an EDR and have a team in place to be able to do those searches and respond to these incidents. But nevertheless, this is one data source that is used a lot nowadays. And it was beneficial to mention that not all EDRs are reporting the same level of telemetry. And just to see, I want to see personally what was the difference. And this is how it started.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So how many companies have you reviewed as part of this project so far?
I can't remember the exact number, but there are plenty in especially for the Windows table. I think we have a little bit less in the Linux table, but yeah, I think for the Windows we have 20 vendors at the moment, and for the Linux comparisons we have 11 vendors. That's because the Linux EDRs, the EDR products do not always have an EDR agent for Linux. But yeah, we are always looking to get more vendors involved. So this is
Yeah.
growing.
Okay, cool. And based off of your findings so far, what has surprised you the most?
The lack of documentation from the EDR vendors themselves. And it was interesting as well to notice that in some cases, in a lot of cases, vendors reported that they made this specific data available to the user, but through testing and evaluation, I, s- you know, see with a lot of vendors that this is not the case. So we have to note it down, let them know, or in many cases, they will see it themselves and go fix the gap that they have. So in a way, we are helping vendors to improve the data that they make available through their products, and we highlight any gaps that there are in existing documentation that they have. So yeah, this was very interesting to see because we shouldn't be blindly trust
Yeah.
everything that we see in the documentation. So if we don't test and evaluate our products and what they can do, we cannot tell for certain.
Yeah, no, I think that's super interesting because of the part where they're saying that they provide these things, but they actually don't when you dig into it. And I think that's so important then for you to have this project to put that pressure on these organizations to maintain that level of integrity and to have that visibility. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the important things to note here is that it's not that they are willingly doing this. It's just sometimes mistakes happen, or after you make an update you might break something and not realize it,
Hmm.
and it's easier for an outsider to be able to do certain tests and evaluate because they have no biases, they have no insights into what they do to generate that telemetry. So a third party evaluating those services and reporting back for improvements, it's always beneficial for these organizations, I think.
And have you seen that feedback loop come full circle to where they're actually changing things based on your
Yeah.
report? Okay, that's exciting.
Yeah. 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 We had so many vendors coming back, fixing the issues and providing evidence in order to make the corrections in the EDR telemetry project. This is what I want to do initially. I want to make sure that highlight those gaps. And I was hoping that vendors will take notice and fix those. A lot of them have already. Uh, it's great to see this feedback loop, as you said, where they see the results and they are looking and they are very interested in fixing the products. Some vendors are, some vendors aren't. But I have a big respect for the vendors that really pay attention to what their customers want and the feedback that third party people like me provide to them to improve their products, because improving their products will make everybody else's life easier with
Yeah.
investigating incidents and dealing with this type of data
Yeah,
gaps.
no, for
Yeah.
sure. And that's exactly why I want to talk to you because I think, well, I'm not an incident responder. I sit in the business side of cybersecurity. So it's interesting for me to hear about this. And also, I'm just wondering, with regards to the actual telemetry that these businesses are collecting then. I understand that you have kind of like a weighted system to get a score to evaluate the telemetry that these people are providing. So, what is the most important, do you think?
Well, when I first started the project, along with another member of the information security community called Alex, we saw the project as highlighting what are the different categories and subcategories that we chosen, and from those, like what are the vendors reporting, and compare them using a table type of format. So we use different implementation statuses, whether if the vendor has the telemetry, it's a yes. If they don't, it's a no. If they have it through enabling a different type of
Yeah. A
turning a switch
plug-in or
on,
something.
yeah,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
yeah, it's via implementing telemetry. If it's through event logs, it's via event logs. And this is very important to separate, because if they are, for example, have this telemetry through event logs, it's great that they have it, but a customer of theirs might not have enabled certain logs, so they will not be able to demonstrate
Hmm.
that telemetry capability to the user if the customer doesn't have the the Windows logs enabled on that system, for example. So with that in mind, with these different statuses in mind and the different nuances of those statuses, we created a scoring system. The scoring system that was actually introduced by another member of the community, and then I implemented it into the project. It was a feature request, and they did a lot of the legwork as well to come up with a scoring. And I just had to reevaluate some fields, and adjust the scoring. And basically, we came up with this final scoring for each operating system, the Windows and Linux that we support at the moment for the EDR Telemetry project, and assign a different scoring to to each subcategory. And
Hmm.
this just makes it easier for the people to see just an overview of how each EDR product is doing
Yeah.
you know, in producing that type of telemetry. But each category has a different scoring, and it's a little bit subjective, but at least everybody is following the same scoring template,
Hmm.
and everybody's scoring based on the same values. So I would say the scoring is very accurate and demonstrates the difference between EDR vendors. But it's worth keeping in mind that those values that are assigned to each subcategory are a little bit subjective, based on,
Yeah. Based on
the
what you're
usefulness.
deciding is
Yes,
useful, right? But
yes.
what have you put as the top weighted category?
Um, it's per subcategory. So process creation, file modification, file creation, process access, all those high level subcategories that we use a lot on a day-to-day basis for investigations and creating detections. Those have always had the one, for example, scoring, which is the highest. So it's not that they have all of them different scoring. It's just like those most useful type of subcategories have a little bit, have the highest score that they can get.
Yeah.
And some of the other ones, like account logout, process termination, account log off, and file renaming, they have a little bit of a lower scoring,
Right.
but it doesn't mean that they're not as useful.
Hmm.
It does that just to provide an overview to the people who visit the telemetry project on how the different EDR vendors, stack against each other. That's all really.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering because it is so different for every organization, right? And how you decide to score that is different. So if I am a security leader and I'm wanting to look at your project to help me evaluate my EDR choices, do you think I'm looking at the overall scoring or do you think I'm drilling down into all of the ways that you've decided to score based on like what telemetry is important for me?
the management team and people who made the decisions usually would not want to go into the Windows table and
And
look
like do all the
into
little
it, yeah, and compare it because a lot of the times they will not know, the difference between the different subcategories and why
Mm,
this is useful. And if I don't have it, what does that mean for me and my organization?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of it, of that technical aspect. That's why we introduced the scoring, but then we wanted a better way to demonstrate some statistics. So I came up with a new website that has statistics implemented. There is a specific page that demonstrates, the difference between all EDR vendors and compares them with using beautiful graphs and templates and panels and cards just to give a better perspective into the different EDRs that might be more useful or more suitable for
Yeah.
their environment. So yeah, drilling down to the statistics of the EDR telemetry website might be a little bit more useful for people that want to compare a specific EDR vendor against the rest. But then if they want to see an overview of how they've done in terms of scoring against all the rest, you know, they can also check out the scores. And yeah, they don't have to get into the nitty gritty again of how we score it. It's there if they want to go have a look.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And I guess I'm also wondering because I think in cybersecurity we often say something like you can't secure what you can't see, right? And if and you can't you but you don't know what you can't see unless you know. So
You
it's
don't
like
know what you don't
the
know.
constant paradox of cybersecurity.
Yes.
And the more telemetry theoretically that you're collecting, the better equipped you will be for your incident response because you'll have all that information at your ready hands. But the flip side is that collecting all of that information all the time is maybe not necessary, and you're maybe paying for more than you need to for your services or for collecting the data or too much payload on your environment or whatever. So, how can people find the right level of telemetry that they want to be collecting for their incident response team and for, their cybersecurity posture in general to be accurate enough to actually respond to these incidents?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I want to address this first of all from the perspective of the NDR vendors. I personally think if you pay for an EDR product, you you as the vendor should make this telemetry available to the customers that pay a very good price for that
Okay,
EDR.
say it louder for the people in the back.
I think it should be part
Yeah.
of the EDR package that you're
Hmm.
receiving from the vendor. I understand that vendors will have to figure out a way to find this balance, but cutting out telemetry, I don't think that this is the right approach. Maybe be more targeted in how they show the telemetry,
Hmm.
depending of what happens on the host, might be more useful. So we know that telemetry is possible for this CDR product, for example, but it will be generated.
From
But even
loopholes.
yeah, yeah, even that it's a little bit problematic because you don't know what you don't know. You're right on the money there, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of the times, if we say that we have to generate, because this is what a lot of VDR vendors do. They say we will generate the telemetry based on what happens on the host. If a certain activity occurs, we will make sure we trigger a high level of telemetry output just surrounding that activity. But then again, you don't know what you don't know. What if you don't have the capability of knowing what is making that suspicious activity being suspicious if you don't know that this is something that you should have, as an
Yeah.
action to kick off a higher verbosity of the telemetry output,
Yeah.
you will never do it. So we have to have certain telemetry always be generated by these EDR
Okay.
vendors. Now, when it comes to outside of EDRs, I think uh, people might not want to duplicate the data telemetry efforts. So if you have telemetry for process creation logs from your EDR, if you can have it from a different data source, like 4688 logs, for example, or Sysmon Event ID1 logs for process creation, it's a great practice to have more than one
Mm.
different data sources
Hmm.
that you can just cross check and validate. But it doesn't mean that you have to send all of those methods into your SIEM solution because that can get expensive. So deduplicating those type of telemetry data might
Yeah.
be a little bit more financially savvy, I guess.
Okay, so
So
you're saying just have it available, but you don't necessarily have to put all of that through your Siemens SOAR.
you will have to have one of those data sources, like EDR process creation could be one of the data sources that you have at your disposal whenever you want to see and search for it,
Mm-hmm.
but have as well hosts in your environment implemented with Windows Event Login to log this type of
Mm.
activity by default as well.
Yeah.
And hopefully you will never need it, but if you need it, at least it will be on the host so you can
Yeah.
extract it later on.
Yeah. And then hopefully you just like don't collect so much data that it becomes so expensive for each to run.
Exactly. So yeah, so you can be
You can find that middle
selective.
ground. Yeah.
Yeah, in that way.
Yeah, I think so I was just telling you before that I went to this tabletop exercise simulation, and in
Hmm.
the simulation they were just going like, we don't have this, we need this data, we need this data, we need this data, and I just can't help but think that like, yeah, the more of that data that you have, the more equipped that you're going to be in that incident where you're like, oh, I need this information, and suddenly we don't have it, it's not in front of me anymore. And yeah, I was just wondering about over collecting data and like how we would deal with that. But that I think answers my question, so it's cool.
Yeah. No, and it's always useful to have all this data, but you know, you have to balance it out.
Yeah.
Figuring out how to do that, it's up to you and your specific environment, but you should have at least some of the data that, because we have in the EDR telemetry project, we have telemetry data that are absolutely necessary, in my opinion, to be that. There is a lot more telemetry that is generated on a Windows or a Linux host, a lot more than we don't have in the EDR telemetry.
Mm,
Doesn't mean that it's not important, but we believe it's not as important.
right.
So at least have that telemetry,
Yeah, the
available
basics. Yeah.
for your users because
Right.
it will be making their lives a lot easier.
So is your recommendation then with this project to for companies to pick the vendor with the highest score then?
I think it depends of your environment and what type of data do you currently have from what different data sources those data, for example, Windows event logs, as we said.
Yeah.
And if you find an EDR that fits exactly as you want it for your specific needs, but it doesn't generate all the telemetry in the world and it's a little bit lower in the scoring, for example, for the EDR telemetry project, it's okay as long as you understand the telemetry that you might need in a case of an incident, for example, and as long as you know that you can find this data from a different means, and
Yeah.
you will be able to trust the data and have them readily available
Yeah.
when you need them.
For
Uh,
sure.
so ADR is not just telemetry; it's a lot more.
Yeah.
But it's very important to highlight because this is what we're looking here. We're not looking into detections or preventions. We're looking into telemetry. So it's very important to highlight that it's the telemetry. It's the telemetry that makes all the difference. But of course, if you already have some of that telemetry through different means,
Yeah.
you might
And just
look
that
into different aspects of the ADR. Yeah,
yeah,
as
and just
well.
that not all vendors are providing the same thing.
Exactly. And we
Yeah.
have many vendors that are not
So
eligible
many.
to be in the project.
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, they're not eligible to be in the project, but it doesn't mean that they are a bad product. It just we have certain criteria for the project, and they don't meet those criteria. And it's not that they are bad. It could be. a good solution for a specific need for someone in their specific environment and, setup, but it's not eligible for our EDR telemetry project.
Yep, fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, Kostas, thank you so much for coming on the show. That was great. If we want to find you and the EDR project and what you're working on, where can we look?
We have the website that has a lot of the features we just discussed. It's the edr-telemetry.com. And you can personally find me on LinkedIn and Blue Sky.
All right, great. I'll put those links in the show notes. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thank you.